This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Now that was a big win. I'll explain why here next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Hit. Caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it and a touchdown. Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, and welcome to a relieved, but then also celebratory, excited, dare I say, enthusiasm unknown to mankind edition of Michigan Podcast. I'm Steve Deace, and we keep hope alive. I mean, hope is restored here for the Michigan football fandom. And I don't care what anybody says. Any idiots in the comments section, well, you got that excited about a 6-4 football team. They were top 5 in the country a few weeks ago. And this is the game that Michigan always loses. And had Penn State won this game, they'd have been ranked in the top 20 this week of the college football playoff rankings. But instead, Michigan got it done. And without a gimmick, without a fluke, without even some lucky break that maybe as Michigan fans we think is a program we're way overdue for. What I love the most about Michigan winning this game is twofold. Number one, the way it was done against Penn State. How often we have seen Michigan lose this very game. And let's face it, if you didn't think Michigan was going to lose after that strip sack of Cade McNamara and then Penn State takes the lead on the field goal, then you've been asleep for the last 15 years of Michigan football. You haven't watched a game because this is the game we lose. The moments that we remember as kids, Biaka Batuka against Ohio State the day after, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, Desmond Howard striking the pose, polish off the Heisman Charles Woodson, Manningham from Henny, Braylon Edwards in triple overtime against Michigan State. Those moments that we all grew up watching have been few and far between. We're not the program that does that anymore. We're not the team that makes the big play anymore. We're the team that lets you hang around and then lets you do the big play against us and crushes our fans in the scrot again. And so to see Michigan come right back and for Cade McNamara to hit Eric All for that touchdown pass and then to come right out and shut Penn State out 4 and out after giving up how many fourth down conversions? I think this was more than a win. I think Michigan broke a paradigm here. Michigan was the team, again, that made the big play. Michigan was the team, again, that had the grit and the guts and glue of the maize and blue. We have lacked this. We've been a front runner program for how many years? We don't respond to getting punched in the mouth. And all the adversity you could possibly imagine Michigan faced going into this season and throughout this season. And in the end, the Wolverines stand at 9-1. And look at the players that made those plays. DJ Turner got beat. I mean, he had good coverage, just those guys were better on both Penn State's tying touchdown and 2-point conversion. He got beat on both of those plays in a row. Yet he's the guy that came out and dislodged the ball from Jahan Dotson on that key 3rd and 2 that forced a 4th down and then ultimately ended the Penn State threat. McNamara is the guy that fumbled from the blind side on a strip sack. Wasn't his fault. I mean, didn't see that guy coming, but then he's the guy that comes back and throws the touchdown pass. Eric All used to be Eric Drop All around here. I mean, he was known as the guy that was kind of a symbol for Harbaugh overhyping his team in the spring. This guy could be the best tight end Michigan's ever had. And we're like, I don't know, can he catch a pass on 2nd and 5? Let's start with that. He's the guy out there on a bum ankle outrunning the entire Penn State secondary to the end zone to score the game-winning touchdown. And I mean, that's not the game Michigan loses or wins. That's the game Michigan always loses, or at least this most recent era and iteration of Michigan football since Lloyd Carr retired. And I don't know how, if you're a Michigan fan, you don't feel as if at least some of your hope that we can still be victors valiant has been restored. Now, I know that, there's a certain event looming in about 2 weeks. I don't care about that game. I'm out. It's irrelevant to me. I can't put myself through it anymore. I'll be at a daddy-daughter date with my daughter Zoe watching Ghostbusters, okay? But for this season, and to be 9-1 with all of the question marks, give everybody from Jim Harbaugh on down a ton of credit. And that brings me to the second thing I loved about this game. I got a little choked up at the end of the game. And the reason why is because I love Jim Harbaugh. Everybody knows that, if you know me. Favorite all-time player. I've not enjoyed what the last couple of years of Michigan football has turned me into, but I was kind of beginning to look at him the way that Michael looks at Fredo, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm like, don't go against the family, brother. And I think y'all know after last season, I was totally fine putting Fredo on the canoe out there. Metaphorically speaking, of course, we're just talking about a job, and pulling the plug, saying, yeah, this isn't going to work. Time to move on. Cut bait. Kill off the dead weight. And to see the old Jimmy back, the fire, not just the weird, but the weird and fiery Jimmy back. Literally, his pants started on fire before the game because he was standing too close to the heaters on the sidelines. All right. That's the weird stuff. Where's the guy that, everybody was mocking, but it worked? Spending nights at recruits' houses, climbing trees, going go-karts, jumping in pools. That guy looked like the coach we thought we were hiring on December 30th, 2014. Instead, we've kind of had this standoffish, studious individual for the last few years. I wanted my Jimmy back. And frankly, I thought that he was gone and wasn't coming back. And that's why it was time for us to mosey on along. But he is back. And on some level, my hope and faith in Michigan football is back. And I don't know about you, just speaking personally, but on a personal level, Michigan football has been an oasis for me for many, many years. It was an oasis for me to get around and away from, at times, abusive upbringing, and just kind of drown that out by becoming fixated and focused on every Michigan game every week. And then as I got into what I do now professionally and a lot of the difficult and depressing subjects and issues that we cover, this was my oasis. This is my, few nights during the basketball season, few days during the football season a year where I'm just a guy named Steve who loves the maize and blue. And I'm the same kid that used to sit in the basement on Royal Oak Street in Wyoming, Michigan, watching every game and living and dying with the outcome. And I've missed that. And the last couple of years, this has not been fun to watch. A lot of my fandom has been taken away and replaced with a cold, cold heart, man, where I'm just waiting for the sword of Damocles. I was about Detroit Lionized. I mean, I had just really about given up. And it made me cold and bitter. And I didn't like it, but I also couldn't help the way that all these disappointments have made me feel. And I just so desperately want something to not get ruined in the times in which we live. I just so desperately wanted something to still be innocent fun and okay to care about way too much for a little bit of time as an escape, and then back to the existential issues we face on a daily basis. And I haven't had that from Michigan football the last couple of years. And Saturday kind of felt like it was back. And that's why I got a little choked up, because I love this damn team. And other than my faith and my family, I have gotten enjoyment out of nothing more in my life than I have being a Michigan fan. And I wanted to experience that again. And it's been a couple of years since I've been permitted to do that. And Saturday, my heart kind of thawed. My, as Bob Ufer used to say, my cotton picking maize and blue heart, it had grown 2 sizes too small. I was quite the Grinch. It thawed at least a little bit. And I like it. And I'd like to see more of it. And I know I'm not alone. So go Blue. Well, the calendar is about to turn to basketball season. And if you like sports handicapping and you like Michigan Podcast, a great way to marry those two is to support us on our Patreon at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. College basketball last year, we were 59 games over 500. We hit 56% of the games in the NCAA tournament. We correctly advised you to take Baylor at 6-1 to win the NCAA tournament, which they did. We had a very good college basketball season last year, especially down the stretch, and we're loaded for bear now for the new season as well. And yes, we'll continue on with our football handicapping as well. So make sure you support us, just $5 a month. Who knows, it might win you some money when you go to patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. Well, let's get a view from the other side of the scarlet and gray septic tank with our good friend and maybe only reasonable bucknut, Mark Rogers. He himself has a fantastic channel here on YouTube, the voice of college football. Good to see you, my friend. Hope you are well. And I laid out at the beginning here why I, frankly, as a fan, I got a little choked up watching the game on Saturday, just because a lot of the fun I've had and enjoyment and escape, from life's difficulties I've had going back to when I was a kid, watching Michigan football since I was in the 5th grade. A lot of that the last 15 years is beaten out of me, particularly the last few. And I'd kind of become a maize and blue Grinch about Michigan football. My heart had grown 2 sizes too small. And it thawed a little bit that, we just don't win this game anymore. For the last 15 years, we're not the team that makes the play or two at the end, when really for my, the first 30 years I was a fan, these were the games we always won. It was, then go on the road and lose at Purdue when you run your nose guard on goal line. That's the game we lost. Okay. But, these pivotal kind of moments were often the moments that Michigan football culture shined through. And those have been, we don't have those losses under Harbaugh anymore, but we don't have any real marquee wins either. And I was just tickled that we actually, to me, it was more important to win it that way than to go in there and just kind of play your best game and blow a 6-3 team out of the water. That we had to overcome that adversity. The other coach had to make the mind-numbed game management decisions for once. That we had to fall behind and make the clutch plays and then get the key stops. Because to me, I think that's a paradigm breaker for Michigan football. Might not mean anything 2 weeks from now, and I don't really care about 2 weeks from now anyway. I'd be satisfied if we were just clearly the second best program in this league, because we can't even beat Penn State and Michigan State consistently before even worrying about 2 weeks from now. So I think this was a very important win. But what do you think?
Well, it's nice for me to actually witness this. And I did see your tweets, and to witness this now face to face, to be able to see some joy out of you. I enjoy that. I want to see this every day out of the year out of you, except for the time we get together after that game next week. Jim Harbaugh, after the game, I know that he showed some exuberance after the Nebraska win, but I think that was kind of yanked out of him by Aiden Hutchinson kind of grabbing his shoulders and saying, Coach, we did it.
Yep.
Wake up. let's go. This is good. But against Penn State, he was having fun. He was exuberant after the game. Thought it was fun what he did with the sideline reporter. I don't know who that was.
Molly McGrath.
Anyway, with the sideline.
It really ticked her off, by the way.
McGrath.
She was really ticked off after that. Yeah.
That's what I heard. I didn't see anything directly from her posted, but
I just watched the video, and when he gets to the end, the look on her face, she's not happy. But go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like he blew her off, but he wanted the players to shine.
Mm-hmm.
So he grabs Eric All. He got her a good interview anyway. I know she wants to talk to the guy, but still, he was just having a good time. She should have had fun with that. Been like, oh man, he's going to celebrate with his players. He was truly excited about the win and felt just overjoyed for his players. And hey, we did it. And that was a great game. And I don't care what anyone says. You know what the deal is with college football and with these games. The aftermath from the critics and the glass half empty people is always, well, then you got to downgrade the team that you just beat. Well, They really weren't that good. And I know they're 6-4, but if they had won that game,
Penn State would have been 16th or 17th in the playoff rankings tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are legitimately a good team. They are one of the 20 best teams in the country, easily, even beat up. They are. I don't care what their record is. They beat a good team in a difficult environment on the road and got it done.
Are we at the point now that, last year happened. Those games count. But in the last few weeks, I've noticed that my handicapping on my Patreon page has improved dramatically. And the only thing different I'm doing is I have just decided to completely and totally disregard in my own assessment and power ratings what I thought of these teams based whatsoever off of anything we saw last year. And can we just safely, because at the very least, he has the program back to where it was in 2018. They were 9-1 that year. They got to 10-1, and then they played Ohio State at the end. That we could be looking at a situation where next week, Ohio State plays Michigan State and Oregon's on the road at Utah. Both Ohio State and Michigan could be in the top 4 next week heading into that game. And if you're a Michigan fan and you look at, programs like Purdue and the investment that they make in football now is nothing compared to what they were doing in the 80s and 90s. That at this point, your hope is let's just get to that last game of the year and have it be for the championship. And if we survived enough to get to that point, then that was probably a pretty good season. We'll see what happens. At the very least, has he rebuilt it to that point, do you think?
David Orlovsky made a comment during the game that he believed that Michigan was one of the 4 best teams in the country. I'm not going to quite get to that. I think that there's such a drop-off after Alabama and Ohio State. I don't know. But yes, so people don't want to hear this. Michigan fans don't want to hear this. Anybody who just says, okay, it's a gold medal society, and that's why we judge programs to be elite and nothing else matters. The Super Bowl losers, a failure, all of that, don't want to hear this. But that game in Ann Arbor in 2 weeks, if it is a competitive, close game, yes, it's going to be a bitter defeat for Michigan, losing 38-31. But that will prove so much that if they're able to hang in that game, and then you start to judge, okay, next year, gotta win it, all that. And not that this team's not capable of possibly pulling off that upset, but it will matter if they're competitive versus 56-28.
There's 2 things I think they have going for them that they haven't in the past. One, the ability, and this is what you saw the Buccaneers do with Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl. This is what you saw the Giants do to Tom Brady twice in Super Bowls. The ability to sit back with 7 guys and get pressure on the quarterback with 4. We might have David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson might both end up breaking Michigan's sack record. And this just in, Michigan's had a lot of good defensive players and won a lot of games, for the last 130 years. That's there's a lot of guys that have made a lot of money playing on Sundays that didn't set that sack record. Both these guys might do it. And you really can't afford to roll your to roll your protection to one side. Teams try that. Aiden got off to that great start, so they rolled their protection over there, and then David Ojabo just friggin' went Brandon Graham and went off. And now teams don't know what to do, and the only thing you can do, frankly, is to leave a tight end and a back in on both ends to chip, but then that stops you from putting 4 receivers out in the route on every single possession as well. I think that's something that's different. The ability to say, all right, we're just going to play these 7 guys, keep you in front of us. You're not going over the top. We'll keep you in front of us, and we're going to play these 7 guys back here and just get pressure with the front 4. It's been several years since Michigan had a defense or a scheme. I think when they had Chase Winovich and Rashawn Gary, they could have done that, but that wasn't the scheme we ran under Don Brown, right? So I think it's the first time that the scheme and talent along those lines in this current era of Ohio State dominance lines up that Michigan thinks that it has a chance to just rush the passer with just 4. I think that is a difference. I think the other difference is just the toughness. I've just seen Michigan take a lot of punches in this season that in the past it has not taken and not recovered from. And I think those 2 things are different than what Ohio State has faced with Michigan the majority of these last 15 years. Doesn't mean it'll change the outcome or anything at all, but I do think that those are 2 things that Ohio State cannot just simply check a box and say, this is the same team we named the score against in 2018, 2019.
Yeah, you're going to the same well I was going to. I had the same framework in my mind heading into this conversation was the great equalizer is superior pass rush. Patriots, Giants, Super Bowl, the classic example. You named a few other ones where, yes, from week to week, watch that Patriots team in 2007. Nobody was close. They were blitzkrieging everyone like Ohio State did against, who else is doing to Purdue what Ohio State did last week to Purdue? No one. Purdue has been a really capable team this year against everyone, and obviously has the 2 top 5 wins. But Ohio State, when given a couple opportunities, couple mistakes, or just needing to drive the length of the field, somebody asked me the other day to compare Cade McNamara and C.J. Stroud, and I said, well, on one hand, C.J. Stroud looks like the best player. That's the default answer. But Cade McNamara showed me something against Michigan State. He made throws that I haven't seen C.J. Stroud need to make. He had helmets in his chest, was throwing, anticipating in windows. He was making NFL throws repeatedly. I don't know if he just played out of his mind that one game or he's capable of doing that again. But C.J. Stroud throws to guys who are wide open, waving their hands up constantly. Nothing against him. He's doing what the play requires, and obviously throw to the open man. But he's got 3 of them, it's seemingly on every play. But this might be the defense that might be able to collapse on him just repeatedly and start to rattle him with those 2 bookends and make it really fun to watch.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Michigan's the first team to score 3 offensive touchdowns against Penn State this year. Because didn't Ohio State kick 4 field goals, get a defensive touchdown, and then score 2 offensive touchdowns?
Yes.
So I think Michigan is the first team to score 3 offensive touchdowns against Penn State. They scored all 3 on long fields. None of them were set up by some kind of sudden change, turnover deep in their own end. And they had, of course, those blustery conditions with the winds and the cold and everything else there. So what does that say to you? Maybe he says nothing. I don't know. I mean, we are only talking about 21 points here, which is pretty pedestrian by modern college football standards. But what does that say, if anything, to you?
And what about Hassan Haskins and what factor he could be in this game? It's one thing to see these guys run hard and then get taken off the field. Both you and I remember when the same 11 played on that side of the football, regardless of position. And now you see so many guys, running back up by committee, even main running backs being relieved on a regular basis. But Hassan Haskins losing Blake Corum, it's one thing, again, to run hard, but to do it repeatedly against NFL players, knocking heads with NFL players on the other side of the ball repeatedly 31 times. And that's going to be something that I don't know that Ohio State's seen either, just a guy that is just an offensive line and a back that's going to lean on you with that kind of determination, talent, and will in the fourth quarter.
To me, Hassan Haskins is Leroy Horde if they still wore the big pads from the 80s, because I mean, they're extremely similar. But you know what? We've spent a lot of time talking about an event that's 2 weeks away. Now, these two teams got games this weekend. And, Ohio State is finishing, I think the toughest gauntlet in college football here down the stretch. You're gonna, if you had a top 25 Purdue who had already beaten two top 10 teams, now you're going to play top 10 Michigan State, then you're going to play maybe top 5 Michigan, and then you're going to play, if you win all 3 of those games, then you go play a top 15 or so resurgent Wisconsin, who I think has given up or has scored more points in the last few weeks. Or given up fewer points in the last few weeks than Northwestern has scored or something this season. I mean, it's the stats with what Wisconsin has done are kind of nuts. Any worries here? We're kind of looking ahead. I mean, you do have maybe a pro quarterback there at Maryland. I don't know who he's throwing to because their 4th receiver now. It's pretty much Raheem Jarrett, and I don't know who the rest of their receivers are. But and Michigan State is not chopped liver. Michigan played that same defense against Michigan State we're talking about, where they set the 7 guys back and rushed the 4 and got a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and then they gave up 5 rushing touchdowns to Kenneth Walker. Okay, playing soft up front. Now, I could see Travion Henderson having a day like that in response. But are we looking ahead too quickly here? Are either one of these two teams in any real danger this weekend? See, because I don't think they are. I don't think Michigan's going to win like 40-10. I could see it being like 28-17. It was never really that close. Michigan just got in and got the job done. But I mean, I know what Michigan State's pass defense looks like. And pretty much every FBS quarterback they've played this year has had their best game of the season against them from a yardage standpoint until Little Tua this past week. And the only exception was the Western Kentucky quarterback because he threw for like 400 and something against somebody else. So, I mean, I think it's a bad matchup for Michigan State. I don't know how they cover those receivers at Ohio State because they don't generate the organic pass rush either that Michigan does.
Yeah, so looking at Ohio State, Michigan State first, the Spartans are giving up just truckloads of yardage, and it's not garbage yardage. It's legit. Aiden O'Connell only missed on 12 or 14 passes out of 54 attempts for 536. Same thing this last weekend against Maryland in a fairly competitive game. So I think the secondary issues at Michigan State are legit. So Ohio State, a 19-point favorite against a team that's roughly top 5 in the country is just insane. But
yeah, I don't know if they'll cover that. But to me, I think it's like going to be 38-28, but they were never really threatened. Does that sound about right to you?
I thought the point spread against Purdue was too much, and it turned out not to be.
The difference is Purdue doesn't have a Kenneth Walker to run up to keep you honest at the point of attack. They don't have any kind of running balance like that at all.
Absolutely. I think Maryland is what Maryland always is, except they've got a capable quarterback now. So they've got a NFL player on each level of the defense, but it's not good enough to make up for generally an awful defense. And they've got speed on the outside of wide receiver, even though they lost one of their best, Dante Demas, several weeks ago. But they've got a capable quarterback, but he turns the ball over too much. So they give you the splash plays. They can give you the big plays. But overall, it's just not it's a thin football team trying to play in the Big Ten against much better competition. And, that Michigan wins that game in the 34-17 range.
Mark, great stuff as always, man. We'll talk to you later, all right? Take care. Have a great week.
Steve. Good to see you.
You bet. This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, true or false? Any Michigan football season that culminates with playing for the Big Ten East against Ohio State on the final weekend of the regular season should be considered a successful season. Almost 70% of you said true. 30% of you voted false. Now, I also voted false. That's why you see the check mark there. But here's why. If this rivalry were restored, meaning on, say, an every other year basis, it was legitimately a question who would win. Doesn't even have to be on every year, but every year or 2 out of 5 years. It was a legitimate question who would win, and it was considered a toss-up. Then I would agree that is true. Because then you're just getting into the randomness of two largely equally matched programs. And, at that point, randomness can just take over. We don't have a rivalry, though. I mean, we have a tradition that usually leads to some kind of a curb stomp. And therefore, I think it's false. Do I think that would be successful this season? Yes. But at some point, you do have to beat these guys and make it a rivalry again. Beat them a couple times and make it a rivalry again. And so I think until that happens, we can't say that. But I mean, that was pretty much the paradigm for the 20 years that Bo coached here. And then Moeller and Carr. If we got to that game at the end and it was for the Big Ten championship, the season was successful. Some years that we got there at 10-1. Some years we got there at 8-3. But that ultimately made the season. That ultimately is what the season was about. Was that game? That's why we called it the game. Michigan hasn't played up to its end of that bargain yet, I think, to definitively say that. But I'd love for that standard to return again. But for that to return, Michigan's got to return to like winning this every now and then. Let's get to this week's feedback of the week. Shane Majewski says, hell yeah, Steve, feels good to feel good. Yes, it does. It does feel good to feel good. It feels good to have hope and optimism that it's not over, that there's some life in the old lady yet. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, brother. That's very well said. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Of course, we got one more game to go to finish out the season at 10-1 and maybe a Rose Bowl berth. How cool would that be? And yeah, if we make the Rose Bowl, I'm finding some way to go. Okay, might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Taking Noah. So I'd love to make a run for the Roses next week against Maryland. Let us know what you think about what we think by following us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. And don't forget, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or right here on YouTube, like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review. Help us get the word out to find more and more Michigan fans just like you. And until next week, when we break down the season finale against Maryland, go Blue.